Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio from Monday, December 20th, 2021. All sides reacting to Senator Joe Manchin saying he is a no vote for now on President Biden's nearly $2 trillion Build Back Better bill that would fund child care and the child tax credit, health care expansion, paid family leave, affordable housing, climate programs, and more. We'll hear from Senator Manchin, as well as the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. Also, a COVID-19 Omicron variant update from Dr. Anthony Fauci from the White House Coronavirus Response Team. Secretary of State Antony Blinken meets with resettled Afghan evacuees in the United States. Pentagon issues new rules aimed at stopping service members from taking part in extremist activities. And a closer look at the final report of the Presidential Commission on Supreme Court Reform. That and more coming up on Washington Today. From the Associated Press, Democratic Senator Joe Manchin all but delivered a death blow to President Joe Biden's $2 trillion domestic initiative, throwing his party's agenda into jeopardy, infuriating the White House, and leaving angry colleagues desperate to salvage what's left of a top priority. The West Virginia senator's announcement that he could not support the bill, delivered on Fox News Sunday, after only a cursory heads-up to the president's staff, potentially derails not only Biden's Build Back Better Act, but sparks fresh questions over passing voting rights legislation and potentially other significant bills that would require his vote in the 50-50 Senate. That was from AP. At the White House briefing today, questions to Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
On the negotiations over Build Back Better, we see Senator Manchin's version of events sort of differ from the White House's version of events in your statement on Sunday, which was yesterday. Feels like a long time ago. I just wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about like where the gap is, if the negotiations fell apart over the child tax credit issue, if the White House is prepared to go around legislation on the CTC if necessary. Kind of where are we with Manchin?
Well, I would say I think a lengthy statement that I issued yesterday outlined pretty specifically the events of the last few weeks. And it was important to the president and to all of us to make that clear to the American people, the status and the steps that had been taken. But I'm not going to relitigate the TikTok of yesterday from here today. I will say that from the president's viewpoint, and I saw him this morning, he's worked with Senator Manchin over the course of decades. They share fundamental values. They're longtime friends. That has not changed. And what's most on the president's mind is the risk of inaction. And if we do not act to get this legislation done and the components in it, not only will costs and prices go up for the American people, but also we will see a trajectory in economic growth that is not where we want it to be. And we've seen projections from Goldman Sachs and others today on that front. So he's no stranger to legislative challenges, and we are going to continue to take steps, work like hell to get it done. Go ahead.
Does the president feel betrayed by his friend?
I think our statement yesterday made pretty clear what we feel, what was the factual depiction of events that happened. But again, the president sees Senator Manchin as somebody who is a longtime friend, somebody who has worked well together on, and our objective and our focus now is moving forward.
The White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, part of today's White House briefing. Part of Psaki's statement on Sunday, to which she referred, says Senator Manchin's comments this morning on Fox are at odds with his discussions this week with the president, with the White House staff, and with his own public utterances. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer today writing a letter to other senators, and it reads in part, senators should be aware that the Senate will, in fact, consider the Build Back Better Act very early in the new year, so every senator of this body has the opportunity to make their position known on the Senate floor, not just on television. We're going to vote on a revised version of the House-passed Build Back Better Act, and we will keep voting on it until we get something done. That from Senator Chuck Schumer, the majority leader. Senator Joe Manchin today interviewed on West Virginia Metro News Radio Network by Hoppy Kercheval.
We're in a 50-50 Senate. You all are approaching legislation as if you have 55 or 60 senators that are Democrats, and you can do whatever you want. Well, you know what? We're all a little bit diverse. I said, I'm not a Washington Democrat. How many times have I said that? I think I still represent the centrist, moderate wing of a Democratic Party that has compassion, but also has reasonability. So with that, I said, I can't. And let me tell you why. When they first brought the bill out, I said, Chuck Schumer, there's nothing in there about accountability, holding people accountable. There's no work requirement. There's no means testing to where you're targeting the people who really need it. To give you an example, the child tax credit. Do you believe people making $200,000 and $400,000 would still get the child tax credit the same as someone making 50, 60, or 70 that really needs it? They didn't do that. So that the price goes up. We have children now that are living with grandparents, and really with the assistance that we give through the welfare system, don't you think that we could basically target that child, make sure the money follows the child? So if a grandparent's raising the child, they're getting the money and not the parent who, even though they're biological parents, are not capable or not having the desire to even raise that child. So many things we can fix, Hoppy, that they won't even talk about. So we've been way far apart philosophically. Now the money. Remember I thought it was a $6 trillion bill, and Bernie says we've cut it down to $3.5. And then it went over to the House, and they cut it down another 2.2, when I've always said I was at 1.5 from the beginning. I gave Schumer exactly the philosophical beliefs and the amount of money that I thought we could raise and pay for everything. So they've had that from day one. On July 2020 of this year, he's had that. Now, he never shared it with anybody. Now they're saying, well, I never told anybody. I says, my goodness, everyone's known. I've spoken so many times on television and telling people where I am. I have a problem. You know, we don't have enough people participating in our society. And a republic, it's a people own it. And a democracy, it's a representative form of government. We have to participate. And we're not. So we need more participation. So we've gone through all of this. So they've cut to $6 trillion, $3.5 trillion, Hoppy, down to $2.2 trillion. And then the president and I were talking about, well, okay, 1.75 was the most. If we did a good tax reform, the only reason I even voted to get on reconciliation was to fix the taxes so that everybody paid their fair share. The ultra super wealthy, the corporations that weren't paying anything, everybody would pay their fair share. And it would be competitive. It wouldn't be just retribution and be, basically payback because they got a big tax break in 2017. Okay, so we went through all that. Let me just say.
All right.
And they couldn't get that. Let me tell you one thing, Hoppy. The same bill I have in front of me right now that they kept putting in front of me was the same $6 trillion bill from the beginning. The only thing that changed was the time element which they would pay for things. And I said, that's just ingenuine to tell someone who's getting a child tax credit, it goes away in 1 year. Okay? Or someone that's getting any of these other services goes away in 2 or 3 years, when we are basically trying to collect taxes for 10 years to pay for them. And that's the truth.
Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat from West Virginia, on West Virginia Radio. During today's interview with Hoppy Kercheval on his Talkline program, he did not blame President Biden directly for the breakdown in negotiations over the Build Back Better legislation. Instead, he pointed to the president's staff.
I'm not blaming anybody. I knew where they were, and I knew what they could and could not do. They just never realized it because they figure, surely to God we can move one person. Surely we can badger and beat one person up. Surely we can get enough protesters to make that person uncomfortable enough. They'll just say, okay, I'll vote for anything, just quit. Well, guess what? I'm from West Virginia. I'm not from where they're from, and they can just beat the living crap out of people and think they'll be submissive, period.
This is what Jen Psaki said yesterday. Senator Manchin promised to continue conversations in the days ahead and to work with us to reach the common ground. If his comments on Fox and written statement indicate an end to that effort, they represent a, quote, sudden and inexplicable reversal in his position and a breach of his commitments to the president and the senators' colleagues in the House and Senate. Your reaction to that?
They retaliated. I figured they would come back strong. The bottom line is, why would I have said earlier when I was asked about the statement that the president put out? And they said, what's about this statement? The president was going to basically delay it because I'd gone and talked to him. He knew we couldn't get there. But, he says, I want to keep trying. I said, sure, go ahead, keep trying. Whatever you got to do, we'll do it. And he made that statement. I said, that was the president's statement. That wasn't my statement. I didn't know. Basically, I'm always willing. You know me, always willing to work and listen and try. I just got to the wit's end, and they know the real reason what happened. They won't tell you, and I'm not going to because.
Wait. You said they know the real reason. They're not going to tell us. You're not going to tell us. What do you mean? What's the real?
Well, the bottom line is there's basically, and it's staff. It's staff driven. I understand staff. This is not the president. This is staff. And they drove some things, and they put some things out that were absolutely inexcusable. And they know what it is, and that's it.
So you're saying the president's staff was putting out, I don't know, was generating criticism of you that finally pushed you to the brink? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying that bottom line, I knew that we could not change. It was never going to change. It never could change with that many people. So for the last month, I've been telling people, they keep saying, Joe, where are you? What are we going to do? How about this? And all of my colleagues are getting very frustrated. I could understand that. And I said, gentlemen and ladies, it's time to vote. Just vote. I'm not going to tell you what they want to guarantee up front. I said, I can't guarantee anything up front. Just vote and you'll find out where I am. Oh, they don't want to do that. I said, well, you're going to have to. I said, you can't continue like this. But they did. I just said vote. And I'm still saying it's hot. And then I think Bernie yesterday on CNN says, I want Manchin. We put it on the floor. I said, Bernie, please put it on the floor. Maybe it'll sink in that we have to look at a different direction than this far-reaching social agenda of yours.
Senator Joe Manchin on West Virginia Metro News Radio with Hoppy Kercheval, who is the host of the Talkline program. The Hill newspaper writes that when it comes to blaming presidential staff, Manchin didn't indicate what he was referring to during the interview. He was visibly frustrated last week over leaks about negotiations over the bill and the child tax credit. This is BS, your BS, Manchin yelled at Arthur Delaney, reporter for HuffPost Politics, who asked him to confirm the report that the child tax credit has become a major sticking point in talks with the White House. He added at the time that reporters were hearing a lot of bad rumors. That from The Hill. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat from New York, a leader of the Progressive Democrats in the House, reacting today on MSNBC's Morning Joe program.
What Senator Manchin did yesterday represents such an egregious breach of the trust of the president. And it's also, this is exactly why it's an outcome that we had warned about well over a month ago, about needing to plan a contingency plan for it. It's why we insisted on having the bipartisan infrastructure plan coupled and passed together with the Build Back Better Act. But I think right now we are at a juncture where it's not really about, I think, being angry. I mean, of course, we have every right to be furious with Joe Manchin, but it's really up to leadership in the Democratic Party who, made the decision to get us to this juncture and how we're going to move forward. And I think right now that Democratic leadership has a very large number of tools at their disposal, the president particularly, and it's really about time that, we take the kid gloves off and we start using them to govern for working families in this country.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on MSNBC. The chair of the Progressive Caucus, Pramila Jayapal, Democratic congresswoman from Washington State, went a little bit further on a conference call today, calling on President Biden to use executive action to unilaterally enact pieces of the Build Back Better agenda. She said with reporters, no one should think that we're going to be satisfied with an even smaller package that leaves people behind or refuses to tackle critical issues like climate change. More from the Associated Press article, writing with Congress recessed for the Christmas holidays, the next steps are highly uncertain. Some Democrats insisted on recalling the Senate to session to force an immediate vote, though that appeared unlikely. Others were fast at work trying to win back Manchin's support and pick up the pieces of what one aide compared to a jigsaw puzzle tossed on the floor. Biden's reputation as a seasoned dealmaker hung in the balance. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tried to strike an optimistic chord, assuring House Democrats and others that an agreement could still be reached early in the new year. With a House Republican point of view, here is Troy Nehls of Texas, interviewed by Fox News Channel.
The White House and top Democrats have been saying, Congressman, this is not going to cost anything. It's completely paid for. But then the CBO came out and said, hey, wait a minute, that's not right. It's going to cost a lot.
Absolutely, and this administration understands that, but they're not being truthful with the American people. The CBO is a neutral organization. They're out there, they're the accountants. They're looking at the number, and the number for them, it's very dismal. It's just adding billions and billions of dollars of more debt to the American people, and I applaud Senator Manchin and some of the other conservatives, the conservatives over there for stopping this, because this is a bad bill. It's dangerous. It's not good for America. It places the American people last, quite honestly.
That's Congressman Troy Nehls on Fox and Friends program Monday morning. From Politico, Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy, a leading voice of House Democrats' moderate wing, announced Monday she won't seek re-election next fall in another stinging loss for her party. The Florida Democrat, who flipped a GOP-held battleground seat in 2016 and helped write the party's playbook for its House takeover 2 years later, said she is leaving the Hill to spend more time with her family, including her 2 school-aged children. That from Politico. Congresswoman Murphy posting a video.
Public service is not without personal sacrifice, and as a mom of 2 young children, my time away from them has been hard, for them, for me, and for our family. So I wanted to share with you that I will not be seeking another term as your representative in Congress. This was not an easy decision, but it was the right decision. I know this may come as a shock to many of you for someone to quote-unquote retire at my age from Congress, without scandal, without immediately seeking higher office, without fear of losing re-election, or without some lucrative job opportunity. I recognize this is a very rare thing to do in Congress, but I still strongly believe in a citizen Congress where ordinary citizens run for office in search of duty and service, not in search of a career. And I never intended my time in Congress to become a career. I am, though, incredibly proud of what we accomplished together over these last 5 years. I am most proud that through it all, whether the Democrats were in charge or the Republicans, whether under President Trump or President Biden, I was consistently named one of the most bipartisan and effective members of Congress. Because from day one, I have always put people over politics. At a time when our politics have become so divisive and dangerous, my greatest hope for my colleagues is that they do the same. To stop the name-calling, saber-rattling, and the disinformation, and to listen to one another. Be ideological in the fight, but pragmatic in the end.
Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy, Democrat from Florida, co-chair of the Blue Dog Coalition, a group of House Democratic moderates, posting that retirement video today. She is the 22nd House Democratic incumbent, deciding not to seek re-election next year, versus 13 House Republicans who are retiring. House Democrats currently hold an 8-seat majority. This is Washington Today. Now to COVID-19. There are now over 1,000 confirmed cases of the Omicron variant in the United States, as the number of Omicron cases continues to double every 2 or 3 days. Overall, U.S. daily cases of COVID, all strains, well above 100,000. This all comes during the busy Christmas holiday travel week. Dr. Anthony Fauci, top U.S. infectious disease expert, interviewed today virtually by National Press Club President Lisa Matthews.
You joined us back in April, and frankly, I got to tell you, right now it seems like we're having a very unpleasant case of deja vu. What is it? And I know you addressed this in your presentation, but what are we doing wrong?
I don't think we're doing anything wrong in the sense of big mistakes. We're dealing with an incredibly formidable virus. But if I were to pick out one thing that we as a nation are not doing optimally, it's the extraordinary situation where you have a highly effective vaccine that is very safe, and you have 50 million people in the country who refuse to get vaccinated, many of which are motivated purely by differences in political ideology, which is really unacceptable when you're in the middle of a deadly outbreak. If there ever was a time when you wanted the nation to focus on fighting the common enemy, and the common enemy is the virus, not ourselves, it is really extraordinary that we are having interference with public health principles for reasons that have nothing to do with public health.
Politico asked John Barry, and you know he's the author of The Great Influenza, how the Biden administration can practice the basic tenets of public health communication, that's, you know, planning for the worst and always telling the truth, without sowing more division and distrust in the government and in science. What do you think the answer to that question is?
Well, there is no good answer to that question. The Biden administration has been driven purely by scientific and public health principles, and for reasons that are very complicated sociologically and politically, those core public health principles are being interpreted as an encroachment upon people's freedom. And it has nothing to do with freedom. It has to do with protecting yourself and your family from a potentially deadly disease that has killed already over 800,000 Americans, but also relinquishing your societal responsibility to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And when someone says, well, I'm taking my own chances, it is my body, I'll worry about it, nobody should tell me that I need to get vaccinated or that I should wear a mask in an indoor setting. Well, that might be fine for you because you have confidence that you're not going to get seriously ill, which quite frankly, hospitals are full of people who made that mistake. And so are graveyards full of people that have made that mistake. But beyond that, you just don't realize that you don't live in a vacuum. You live in a society, and if you get infected, you could transmit that to someone else who might be vulnerable, who might be an elderly person, might be someone with an underlying condition, that actually you're playing a role in transmitting that infection to them, even though you yourself are not particularly bothered by that infection. That's the reason to prevent yourself from getting infected.
Dr. Anthony Fauci is director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, interviewed today by the National Press Club President Lisa Matthews, a virtual discussion. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser declaring a state of emergency and reinstating the citywide mask order that she had lifted on November 22nd. The order kicks in again 6 a.m. Eastern on Tuesday, December 21st, and will run through the end of the year. And Maryland Governor Larry Hogan announcing he has tested positive for COVID-19, the latest high-profile case in the news over the weekend. There were 2 U.S. senators, Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker. Governor Hogan saying he's vaccinated and boosted, and the positive result came as part of a routine test that he takes in the morning, and that he's feeling fine so far. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio getting some questions about the very long lines in his city of people waiting multiple hours to get a COVID test. Video of the line stretching several city blocks circulating on social media over the past couple of days. The mayor at the news conference joined by Dr. Mitch Katz, president and CEO of the New York City Health System.
Andrew Siff from NBC.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and everyone on the call. Can you hear me?
Yes, Andrew. How you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for asking. I want to drill down on the problems in terms of the long lines for testing and the lack of availability in many neighborhoods across the city. Did your office or the health department make a conscious decision last month to scale down testing by 20 sites? And if so, why was that decision made, given that even without Omicron, there was going to be a surge in testing demand ahead of the holidays?
You know, Andrew, let me start, and I'll turn to Dr. Mitch Katz in a moment. We saw a very decreased demand at some of the sites. We moved to a focus on mobile sites where we're getting really good results. And obviously, Omicron then changed the whole picture, and we started to ramp everything up again, and we are quickly ramping up. So we were responding to the experiences we were having, and we did not, and I've been very clear about this in what I said yesterday, we did not expect Omicron to move quite this quickly. And so we are moving quickly to adjust, but we will. Dr. Katz, can we hear? Dr.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Well, I'm as cranky and demanding as any born in New York City person. But, you know, I have to say, the test and trace core doubled in the last 3 weeks its testing capacity. And I acknowledge that and that was just in 3 weeks, sir, that we did twice as many tests. So yes, I'm sorry that demand was so enormous over the last few days. We did not anticipate so much news about Omicron. We did not anticipate that the supply chain would run out of the home tests. In my own pharmacies last week, there were shelves and shelves of home tests to take care of the demand. When I went by yesterday, there were none. So yes, we had a lot of people online, and we appreciate that. We appreciate that New Yorkers wanted to get tested, that they're following your guidance. I'm very pleased to say we're going to be opening new testing sites all of this week so that we have more than 100 testing sites going. We have moved more to mobile testing sites, and we do constantly close testing sites and move them to places where the demand is. I mean, that's part of our model. So when someone says, well, we closed X site, that's only because our own community advisory board said you're going to reach more people if you move from here to there. So we constantly are moving them to try to reach New Yorkers in the greatest of need. We're going to keep expanding to meet that need. And I feel really confident that New Yorkers this week will have a different experience than they did this weekend. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Mitch Katz leads the New York City Health and Hospital System, along with Mayor Bill de Blasio, a Democrat, at today's news conference. De Blasio is leaving office at the start of the year in just a couple of weeks due to term limits. This weekend, de Blasio also called on President Biden to invoke the Defense Production Act to manufacture more at-home rapid COVID test kits. President Biden, according to the White House, will be delivering a nationwide address about the COVID Omicron variant and the next steps. That's going to happen on Tuesday. We will have live coverage when it does happen on the C-SPAN networks. Concerns about Omicron on Wall Street. The Dow down 433, NASDAQ down 188, S&P down 52. Biden administration today raising vehicle mileage standards beginning in the 2023 model year, and by 2026 the industry-wide target will be 40 miles per gallon. That's 25% higher than a rule finalized by the Trump administration last year, 5% higher than a proposal this past August by the Environmental Protection Agency. Washington Today continues in a minute.
Download C-SPAN's new mobile app and stay up to date with live video coverage of the day's biggest political events, from live streams of the House and Senate floor and key congressional hearings to White House events and Supreme Court oral arguments. Even our live, interactive morning program, Washington Journal, where we hear your voices every day. C-SPAN now has you covered. Download the app for free today.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now app and wherever you get your podcasts. A few more headlines. Former President Donald Trump suing New York Attorney General Letitia James, seeking to end the years-long civil investigation into his business practices that he alleges is purely political. This comes after James has requested that Trump sit for a deposition on January 7th. Jury in Minnesota now has the manslaughter case of Kim Potter, the former suburban Minneapolis police officer who says she meant to use her taser instead of her gun when she shot and killed the black motorist Daunte Wright. Prosecutors say that Potter made a blunder of epic proportions and did not have a license to kill. Potter's attorney counters that she made an honest mistake and that shooting Wright was not a crime. And President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden adding to their pet family. First Lady spokesman telling CNN it's a new puppy spotted Monday playing on the south lawn of the White House. According to sources familiar with the new pet, the dog looks to be a German Shepherd or similar breed. The name is Commander, a gift to the president from his family. The Biden's German Shepherd Champ died early this year at the age of 13, and the other German Shepherd in the family, a rescue named Major, has been living mostly in Wilmington, Delaware, after a handful of aggressive incidents involving staff at the White House. An update from Secretary of State Antony Blinken on resettlement of Afghan evacuees in the United States. Ahead of his briefing, CBS News reports that more than half of the 31,600 Afghan evacuees who have left U.S. military sites in recent weeks to start new lives in America have settled in 7 states: Texas, California, Virginia, New York, Washington, North Carolina, and Arizona. Here's Secretary of State Blinken at the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services Facility in Alexandria, Northern Virginia.
To all of you who are involved in the resettlement effort, thank you for showing the best of our country. And to those who've made the journey, who were side by side with our diplomats, our men and women in uniform in Afghanistan over the last 20 years, we're so grateful that you're here. And we want to do everything we can to welcome you warmly to our country. Yours is part of a continuing story, because the story of the United States has been, generation to generation, new arrivals from all parts of this planet coming here, working to make a better life for themselves and their families, and as a result, making our country better and better, greater and greater, and making an even better life for all Americans. That is the story of this country. You're now fully a part of it, and we're so grateful to have you. Another word I want to say as well, to those of you who stepped up and volunteered in one way or another to help this effort, that too is America at its best. And I've seen and heard about some of the stories. We know what volunteerism can do, what it can produce. There are a couple of you who may be even here today, Natalie Perdue, Dan Altman, looked to their neighbors to help with housing for a few families, and all of a sudden, neighbor after neighbor kicked in, and from 10 families, you went to about 55 families that you're helping. It's a powerful example of what people standing up, volunteering, being part of the effort can do.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken meeting with the Afghan evacuees in Alexandria, Virginia. From Reuters, Russia said on Monday it urgently needed a response from the United States on its sweeping security demands, and again warned of a possible Russian military response unless it saw political action to assuage its concerns. Moscow, which has unnerved the West with a troop buildup near Ukraine, last week unveiled a wish list of security proposals it wants to negotiate, including a promise NATO would give up any military activity in Eastern Europe and Ukraine. Washington has said some of Russia's proposals are obviously unacceptable, but that the United States will respond sometime this week with more concrete proposals on the format of any talks. That from Reuters. A follow-up today at the regular State Department press briefing, and spokesman Ned Price.
About Ukraine and Russia.
Sure.
So on Friday and again today, I think Jake Sullivan spoke to his counterpart. You said that you're ready to engage in diplomacy. Is there any path forward you're considering more concretely about this engagement? Is there something that in the Russian response may give you the idea of what will be the next steps? And also simultaneously, do you believe that there is a de-escalation on the Russian side at the border, or not at all for now?
Well, you heard from one of our administration colleagues on Friday who went into some detail about this, but Russia, as we have said, and as everyone knows, has put on the table its concerns with, its stated concerns, with American and with NATO activities. We're going to put on the table our concerns with Russian activities that we believe are harmful to our collective interests and our collective values, collective with our European allies and partners. The White House today noted in the readout of National Security Advisor Sullivan's call with his counterpart, Mr. Ushakov, that we are prepared to engage diplomatically through multiple channels, and that includes through the NATO-Russia Council, through the OSCE, and also, if appropriate, bilaterally. We have made clear through all of this that any dialogue, and dialogue is what we're after, diplomacy is what we're after, but any dialogue, any diplomacy has to be based on the principles of reciprocity. It has to address our concerns about Russia's actions, and importantly, it has to take place in full coordination with our allies and partners in Europe. Nothing about them without them. There will be no talks with Russia on European security without our European allies and partners. The point we have repeatedly made is that we are having this discussion in the context of Russia's ongoing aggression against Ukraine. But in some ways, this is bigger than any one country. It's bigger than any two countries, if you want to look at it through the lens of Russia and Ukraine. This is about one of the foundational principles of the international order. And that is that no country, however large, however powerful, however much military might, whether a country has nuclear weapons or not, no country has the right to dictate borders, to bully smaller countries, to intimidate, to coerce, to pursue their own interests.
State Department spokesman Ned Price, part of his briefing in the State Department briefing room. Warning that extremism in the ranks is increasing, writes Associated Press. Pentagon officials are issuing detailed new rules prohibiting service members from actively engaging in extremist activities. The new guidelines come nearly a year after some current and former service members participated in the riot at the U.S. Capitol, triggering a broad department review. An update on this today from the Pentagon Press Secretary, John Kirby, about the Defense Secretary's steps.
Today, the department issued an updated policy on prohibited extremist activities by military personnel. This is instruction 1325.06, which is an existing instruction that we updated, and we updated it as a result of, as I think you know, when Secretary Austin back in the spring established the counter-extremism working group. That was one of the immediate actions that he wanted them to take. So that has been updated and published, and it goes into effect today. The revised instruction regroups issues into 3 sections: prohibited extremist activities, command authority and responsibilities, and criminal gangs. It also prohibits active participation in extremist activities and clearly defines what we mean by the term extremist activities. As Secretary Austin has emphasized, the department is focused on prohibited activity, not on a particular ideology, thought, or political orientation. The department has always maintained a distinction between thoughts and actions. The new definition preserves a service member's right of expression to the extent possible, while also balancing the need for good order and discipline to affect military combat and unit readiness. These new updates provide increased clarity for service members and commanders on what qualifies as prohibited extremist activities. The Secretary heard from personnel across the force about the need to update and clarify this policy during the stand-downs that he directed earlier this year. That was one of the common bits of feedback that we got, was that they wanted more clarity, and so we tried to do that with this new instruction.
The Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby in the Pentagon briefing room. Senior defense officials tell Associated Press that fewer than 100 military members are known to have been involved in substantiated cases of extremist activity in the past year, but they warn that the number may grow given recent spikes in domestic violent extremism, particularly among veterans. That from AP. This is Washington Today. A few members of the President's Commission on the Supreme Court talked about their final report today, a program hosted by the American Constitution Society. The executive order that created the commission this year asked it to analyze the pros and cons of various reform proposals. Here's one of those members, Kermit Roosevelt, discussing one of the more controversial ideas up for reform, Supreme Court Justice term limits.
Are term limits a solution to the problem that we're facing? Well, it depends on what you think the problem is. And in my view, there are really sort of 3 different problems, which require different solutions, and maybe some of them aren't even appropriate to try to address. But so one problem would be we just don't like the decisions that the court is issuing now. And term limits could resolve that eventually, because term limits will, over time, bring the Supreme Court more in line with dominant political opinion. It's a sort of slow and crude way to do it, maybe, but if there are particular decisions the Supreme Court is issuing that we are concerned about and we think they're out of touch with mainstream public opinion or constitutional consensus, then term limits will take us there eventually. Then there's the second problem, which is that the membership of the Supreme Court is being determined by random chance when there's an involuntary departure from the bench because of ill health or death. It's being determined by strategic behavior by the justices. So a justice will retire when a president of the same party as the president who appointed them can make the replacement. And it's being determined by partisan hardball. So how far are the parties willing to go in breaking prior norms surrounding the nomination and confirmation process? Denying a hearing to Merrick Garland was pretty extreme, but I think we can expect nothing but escalating partisan hardball. So the second problem, and this is what I think term limits really are the right response to, and I'm sort of astonished that there's opposition to them because it seems like such an obviously good idea. The second problem is that the composition of the Supreme Court is determined by these factors, which are not the factors we want. The composition of the Supreme Court should be tied, I think, to success in national elections, so that if you win the presidency, you have some impact on the Supreme Court. And the fact that it's not been done that way, and the fact that despite Democratic success in past presidential elections, we have a Republican majority now that could probably perpetuate itself indefinitely through strategic retirements as long as Republicans win 1 out of every 3 or 1 out of every 4 presidential elections. This can go on forever. That's a problem. Because I don't think that the Supreme Court should be a way in which a political minority can control the country on very important issues. And term limits indisputably will solve that problem. Again, not immediately, but eventually they'll bring us to a rational system, which I think is vastly preferable to the one that I have now. And then there's the immediate crisis, which is what's happening to our democracy. It's will we have fair elections going forward? And term limits will help with that, but again, they'll do it slowly. And I'm not sure that we have the luxury of time on that issue. I think that, it might be that if we don't act soon, we're not going to have fair elections going forward.
Kermit Roosevelt, member of the Presidential Commission on the Supreme Court, at today's discussion hosted by the American Constitution Society. With more on the Commission's report, we're joined by Time reporter Madeleine Carlisle. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me on.
We just heard a bit about term limits. What else is in this 300-page report?
So the report basically reads as a highly researched, incredibly well-written and documented pro-con list for different reforms for the Supreme Court that have been circling in the public discourse for years. So it also includes examination of the legality and feasibility of expanding the number of justices on the court, or reducing the power of the court, or implementing a judicial code of ethics. It really examines different proposals that have long been called for and put them under the microscope and see how practical and feasible they really are.
The report came out a couple of weeks ago, and I guess the headline was, they looked at the issues but made no recommendations.
Yes, exactly. The report mostly made news for its lack of news. The commission did not take a position on term limits, as you mentioned, or expanding the size of the bench, which are really two of the top requests from progressives right now. However, it did take more openly endorse reforms such as a judicial code of ethics or increasing the transparency of oral arguments, some of those lesser reforms.
You had an opportunity to talk with some of the commissioners. How many were there, and how did they operate, and what did you find about their interaction?
Yeah, so there were 34 commission members in total. It started out with 36 members, but 2 of the commission's more conservative members, Harvard law professor Jack Goldsmith and UVA law professor Caleb Nelson, resigned from the commission in October. So it ended up with 34 members, and they really ran the gamut across the ideological spectrum. You had constitutional conservatives, liberals, progressives, famous law professors, former federal judges, leaders of powerful advocacy organizations and powerful think tanks. And so really it was a diverse collection of different leaders on these various issues. And ultimately, the way it worked, what commissioners told me, was that the 34-person body was broken down into 5 different working groups, and each working group was tasked with writing a different chapter, which you see in that final report. And those chapters include term limits, expanding the size of the court, judicial code of ethics, transparency of the court, and any debates about these major issues took place in public hearings, which you can still view online.
So with the report out, what happens next, if anything?
So the report's intended audience is both the general public and the president himself. But what happens next is really up to lawmakers. As the report clearly lays out, any major changes would likely at minimum require an act of Congress, if not maybe a constitutional amendment. And in Congress, reform efforts to, really reform the bench haven't gained traction. perhaps things could change in 2022. The Supreme Court is currently posed to reshape major elements of American society, including abortion access and gun rights and the separation of church and state. And if a pivotal ruling comes down next year, perhaps some of those fringe ideas might start to gain more traction in the American public. But as of now, there isn't the support in Congress to get any of these reforms actually through.
We're talking with Madeleine Carlisle of Time. When this commission was created by a presidential executive order, some saw it as a way of sort of putting off the issue in the Biden administration because of the pressure from the progressive groups to make changes. Has the White House indicated that they're prepared to move on any of the controversial points?
So far, the White House has not said what they will do now that the report is out. You're completely right that throughout the past year, as the administration has been asked about different reform efforts, they've pointed out that they formed a commission to analyze these exact questions, and they will return to these questions once the commission had finished its report and submitted it to the president. Now it's done so, but thus far the president has not said if his opinion on anything has changed, and really that'll be something to closely watch in 2022.
Madeleine Carlisle is a reporter for Time. Find her story at time.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
From the New York Times, Johnny Isakson, a Georgia Republican who succeeded Newt Gingrich in the House of Representatives and in 15 years in the Senate, was a moderate conservative, often championing bipartisan cooperation until his resignation for health reasons in 2019, died on Sunday at his home in Atlanta. He was 76. Isakson suffered from Parkinson's disease, among other ailments, although the cause of his death not publicly released. Before going into politics, Isakson made millions of dollars as a real estate executive. And during his farewell speech on the Senate floor in 2019, he talked about how he brought his business philosophy to public office to try to get things done.
When I started my business, and people wouldn't buy a house from me, I'd shake hands, I'd say, well, thank you for looking with me, and when you buy your next one, call me, I'll do a better job. Because all I have is customers and future customers. So I address everybody as a future customer. And I got some. When I got into politics and started asking people to vote for me, I said, all I've got out there in Georgia is friends and future friends. Pardon me. So when we walked away from a Republican meeting somewhere and somebody gave me their right hand to the face and said, we're not going to vote for you, I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you another chance in 2 years. So it will be a future friend, not a less weak friend. Friends and future friends is what it's all about. You find anybody in business or anything else today that's making it through life, they're making it through life because they treat it that way. Life is a win-win proposition if you'll do it. It's not a win-lose proposition. It's win-win. But you have to command it, whichever side of the transition you're on. So on a day in which I've had more nice things said about me than I deserved, on a day that brought a lot of clarity to me in terms of how much this place really means, I'm the happiest guy that could ever be. Happy because I haven't cried yet, but more happy because all of you look and listen. I think you know what I'm talking about. We can do it. We can do anything. We may be called a liberal, we may be called a rhino, we may be called whatever it is. Let's solve the problem and then see what happens. Most people who call people names and point fingers are people who don't have a solution themselves. They just want to make damn sure you don't solve it. So we got to start doing that, and then bipartisanship will become a way you accomplish things, a way you live, a state of being. It'll be the end of a bad time and the beginning of a new one. And I'm going to live long enough to see both. God bless all of you, and thank you for your support and your friendship to me. It's mean more than I could probably ever tell you. And I'll always be there for you, whether it's buying dinner, going to church, just listen to one of your speeches. I don't have anything else to do. God bless all of you, and thank you very much.
Former Senator Johnny Isakson, Republican from Georgia, part of his farewell speech 2 years ago, December 2019. He passed away on Sunday at the age of 76. President Joe Biden served with Senator Isakson on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, saying in a statement Sunday that he and the late senator found common ground built on mutual respect for each other and the institutions that govern our nation. And the current Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell referring to Isakson as one of my very best friends in the Senate. Thanks for listening today to Washington Today. For more top Washington stories, subscribe to C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word at c-span.org/connect. Hope you have a good night.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Every day, we take your calls live on the air on the news of the day, and we discuss policy issues that impact you. Coming up Tuesday morning, we'll discuss voting rights and election integrity in the U.S. with William J. Roberts of the Center for American Progress and John Fund of the National Review. And then E&E News reporter Hannah Northey talks about the Biden administration's lead pipe replacement plan. Watch Washington Journal live at 7 Eastern Tuesday morning on C-SPAN or on C-SPAN Now, our new mobile app. Join the discussion with your phone calls, Facebook comments, texts, and tweets.